everybody. I'm Danielle. I'm the founder of Tackle What's Next and a founding member with alongside some other amazing folks of the Making Sports More Equitable Coalition. We're continuing our initiative to create conversations around equity and inclusion in sports. And our next topic is around investment in minority entrepreneurship and sports funds and how that plays a role in making our industry more equitable. So we're going to explore inequity within sports entrepreneurship and how each of us can support one another with one goal in mind, being opportunity and access for everyone. And we want to highlight we want to highlight the importance of sports spaces that are representative of the world around us and really learning about the importance of providing resources, connections, and collaborations to diverse peoples within the sports industry. So we're going to really explore this idea of leveling the playing field when it comes to sports startups, entrepreneurship, and how each of us can really create spaces that welcome perspectives different from our own. So today we're here with Krystal Beachum, founder of Student Athletes Unite and an associate at the W Fund. So Krystal, thanks again for taking some time to have this conversation with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure, Danielle.
Awesome. Well, I want to dive right in because you are an entrepreneur yourself. And so I wanted to just start with that journey for you. What made you decide you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Was there like a spark in your journey that was like, ooh, this is something I want? Or was it more circumstantial that led you to this founding Student Athletes Unite?
Well, I think at the very beginning, it was like a necessity because at the time I was a student athlete, of course. And as a student athlete, you don't really have a lot of money. And at the time I was in a position where I attended a university thinking I was going to get my full Pell Grant, and that didn't happen. And so it's like, okay, I have to think of other ways to make money. And I ended up joining a direct sales company that sold travel packages that actually helped me create an extra like $200, $300 a month. And that was something that I was not expecting to get into at all because I do not like selling. I'm not a fan of selling. But my mentor told me that in life, everyone sells, whether it's like you are selling yourself in a sense when it's looking for athletic scholarships, or when you are writing to sell yourself for an academic scholarship. And even when I used to sell Girl Scout cookies, like it's a product and I'm trying to sell, like everything is selling. So when he told me that, I'm like, okay, it makes sense. Like regardless, whatever I do in life, I'm going to sell something. Even as a teacher, when I thought I wanted to be a teacher, it was, okay, you're going to sell these middle schoolers on history lessons, but also selling them on like, hey, in order to get a better life, you need to go to college. So again, everything in life we do is selling. And that was probably the first thing that I can think about when it comes to entrepreneurship. It was out of necessity, but definitely starting Student Athletes Unite was out of curiosity, as well as like trying to be a solution to a problem.
Yeah. And I mean, it sounds like the solution to the problem was one, finding ways for other student athletes in your situation to be able to bring in income for themselves. But I wanted to hear, when you started this, what was that process like? And you mentioned a mentor, like, did you feel like you had resources or were set up to succeed in terms of embarking into this world of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so when I first started like Student Athletes Unite, it was actually a blog. It was around student athlete experiences, around their college experiences, and helping other student athletes understand that it was a recruiting process. So it's like, okay, what would you do if you know now what you did back then? What would you change when it comes to the recruiting process? So it was initially like a lifestyle blog in a sense. But then once I started to talk to more student athletes, they were like, oh, well, maybe you should make this into a business. Like you've done recruiting. Right now, at the time I was working at the University of Arkansas, and as academic counselors, like, well, you do recruiting anyways when it comes to like understanding the classes that they need, what they need to take, on track to graduate, all that good stuff. And I said, maybe I should. So I ended up getting a lot of the resources at the University of Arkansas. They have a business school, so Walton School of Business, and I was able to get all the resources there, but also understanding like what type of company I wanted to create. So of course, there's like 4 types, like S Corp, C Corp, and then LLC, and then like sole proprietorship. And so I was able to understand exactly which one I wanted to go into, but also some background information that I had was my older brother has a business, and then my dad also has a business, and my brother is under LLC and my dad is under like a sole proprietorship. So I was able to just ask them, okay, what are the pros and cons of having this one? And then what are the pros and cons of having the other one? So that was how I was able to learn exactly which route I wanted to take. But a lot of the resources at the University of Arkansas helped guide me and made me successful, I feel like.
Yeah, that's great. And I love that you had family that you could ask. And I think that going to folks that maybe have the more traditional entrepreneurship businesses, we don't think about that as entrepreneurship necessarily, if that makes sense. Like on a conversation we had about this was like, have you talked to your local plumbing company or lawyer, law firm, doctor's office? Like all of those folks are entrepreneurs that started their own practice or started their own business. And so I think, just expanding your definition of entrepreneur beyond like tech entrepreneur or like sports startup, you can get a lot of really great value. And it sounds like that's what you're able to do with your family members, right? I know your brother's probably was more in the sports space, but your dad likely was not. And so it's interesting that you chose kind of to look at those resources and said, hey, give me some insights. Yeah, I like that.
Exactly.
You said before that you felt like you were dumbing down your greatness and it was making you lack confidence in your selling expertise. And earlier in this interview, you said selling was not your thing. So I want to know, what were some of those factors that maybe played into not understanding that true potential? And then what helped you overcome it? What resources or what skills did you have to kind of work on? And what would you recommend to others that might be struggling with kind of the sales aspect of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I think first, like selling is caring, because like if you care about a problem, then you want other people to know the solution too. So I think that was the number one thing that I learned is like, okay, if you care about this person, you know that whatever product or service that you can give them can help their well-being in life. It's like, why wouldn't you? Like you're being selfish at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so when I learned that, I'm like, okay, well, I don't want to be selfish with my gifts. Like, I have these God-given talents and this brain of mine is so creative. It's like, why wouldn't I want to share my thoughts, my products, my services with other people? And that was really the catalyst for me of like, okay, Krystal, like now you're no longer dumbing down your greatness. That was one thing. And then the second thing that I felt that made me not as confident is because I told someone that I really admired that I wanted to start a business outside of grad school. And I was told that, well, you don't look like a business owner. And that was very shocking to me because I'm like, okay, what does a business owner look like? And my first thought of a business owner was my father, who runs a six-figure mechanic business. But if you see him, he's dressed in like this blue suit every day with like grease stains every day, hands dirty, but he runs a six-figure business. So in my mind, I'm like, that's what I've seen my entire life. My grandfather is a mechanic. He runs a really good business. My aunt, she runs a daycare. She runs a successful business over the last 20, 25 years. So I'm seeing those type of people in my life. And when someone tells me that I admire that I don't look like one, I'm just thinking, okay, well, my family don't look like traditional business owners with the suits, with the ties.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very hurtful because I think when you tell people that you care about your hopes and your dreams, you want to get some type of approval from them because you're doing something really good and you think they will be proud of you. But when they say that, you kind of taken back, like now you're questioning your own worth. Like,
yeah,
maybe what am I doing that she doesn't see that in me? And at the time I had just cut all of my hair off. So that was another added bonus. Like, okay, are you saying that is because I just went natural and I had the big chop? Like, so all these thoughts were going in my head. And, but again, had another really great mentor. His name is Tim Lampkin, still a mentor to this day. And he's like, well, Krystal, when you buy into that, you buy into the reality, because they probably said that with their own insecurities of themselves. Like maybe they've tried to start a business on the side and it didn't work. You just don't know what was the reason behind that. But, and then that's also another reason why he's like, well, you can't tell everybody your dreams. So now it's like, I've taken that where it's like, there's this saying, or not even a saying, but J. Cole is one of my favorite rappers. And he's like, well, if they don't know your dreams, they can't shoot them down. So now it's like, I'm really reserved about who I tell like my dreams and my hopes to, because not everyone is entitled to understand where your vision is. And then you also have to guard your vision and your dreams, because I don't want to get back to that place where I'm second guessing myself.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, because I do feel like you're probably not the only person that's had some kind of experience where someone said, well, you don't look the part, right? Like this isn't, you're not the suit wearing, white guy walking into the sports space saying, oh, I've done this a million times before. I look like everybody else in the room. And there is insecurities involved in that. And it's really just, I think the biggest one is just a lack of knowledge and education around what entrepreneurship really is and what it can look like you were talking about with your dad and your aunt. Like, yeah, business ownership looks a lot of different ways, and business owners look very different in reality. Like, again, there's so many businesses we visit that have entrepreneurial roots, right? And it's again, I think your feedback of, learning from your mentor that, stuck around with you and is still supporting you today. Like, you may not want to go out there and blast everything that you're doing if you're not ready for that feedback, or if you just, like if there's things you're just building and you want to build them with people you trust and people you want to kind of get feedback from that, aren't going to crush your dreams, but give you that critical feedback that'll actually be helpful. And I think it is so important to share that perspective, because so many folks that start something can be shot down in 5-minute conversation when someone says, there's no way you're going to be able to do that. And if you don't have other people around you, or if you don't have people that can kind of reflect your own experience almost at the same time, it does make it so much harder. And I think, especially for Black and Brown entrepreneurs, if you guys can't find someone in the room that looks like you, that you could share that experience with, and they could say, you know what, yeah, that happened to me too. And look what I did, like, look how I responded. It makes a big difference. And I think that, clearly this is something that we need to continue to work on. But I appreciate you just sharing that, because I think it'll help someone else that's in your shoes that may also come from that same, background, that says, hey, if she can do this and someone told her this, I can do it too. So I appreciate that. And I think it ties into this question that I have, which is, do you feel like there is still a clear inequity in sports entrepreneurship and investment? I know clearly you've had some negative experiences around mentorship, but, do you feel like there's clear inequity? Are we getting better? Like, where do you see the state of this space right now?
Yeah, I will say we are getting better, but there's still a lot of inequity. And even though we're talking about like sports entrepreneurship, I think it's still all around, especially working at the W Fund and just me doing my own research and my own due diligence, is Black and Brown founders have to go through a lot more than predominantly like white founders, specifically like white males. And a really good example is one of our portfolio companies. She initially had to do crowdfunding or crowdsourcing, which is being on a platform and getting other people that believe in the vision to fund your vision for your company. Whereas like, on top of her making sure that she has an MVP that works and bringing in some type of income before she even gets that type of funding. Whereas like a white male may come in just by an idea. I won white male actually was trying to recruit me for a position in this company. And I was like, okay, is there MVP that I can look at or anything that I can get a sense of like what life at your company will look like? And he was like, oh, we don't have that yet, but we just raised about $500,000, almost $500,000 with just an idea and a pitch deck. And again, I just see that over and over again. And I'm just wondering why, but I also understand that a lot of funding comes from personal relationships. I do realize that, and I do understand that relationships are the new currency for me. I've always believed that, and that is truly significant and is true in the investment space. And I think that Black and Brown founders don't have that type of relationship with those type of investors as well as their male counterparts, because most of their male counterparts are going to like Harvard, Berkeley, all those high-end schools, whereas like Black and Brown founders are not, maybe, and they may not have access to that. But even those people that do go to the Harvards and the MITs, they still struggle to get some type of funding. So I see why and I see how, but it's still like some type of like inequity in investment and funding.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And it's similar. We've interviewed someone else on this topic, and he shared the same thing about the circles that you're able to get access into is such an important part of the funding and investment space, specifically in sports. And I think it sounds like from your perspective, it's not only the relationships, but just the level of trust that people have in the idea you're building. They want a sure thing as close as they can get. And if you don't look like them, they might not be able to like put themselves in your shoes. And I think the crowdfunding example is such a good one that, you know, this guy was able to put something together, get funding on this idea alone, but yet this Black woman had to put crowdfunding together to get backing to show that people actually cared about the idea before someone would put money behind it. So it's not something that you'd necessarily say, oh, well, you know, okay, maybe her idea was a little bit different or out of the box or whatever, but it's those little things that you're just like, okay, well, why is there a difference here? Like, why wasn't he expected to do the same thing, or vice versa? Why wasn't she given the benefit of the doubt? And so you mentioned the W Fund, and I don't know if everyone listening will know about the W Fund at all. So tell us what the W Fund is, how you got involved with it, and why you're involved with them to this date.
Yeah, so the W Fund is a VC fund or a venture capital fund. So they invest in underrepresented founders, so Black and Brown founders, as well as women of color. I mean, not women of color, but white women. I don't want to say it like that, but they're technically like in the minority, like of people that don't get as much funding as their white counterparts. So I will say that. And also how I got involved with this, actually a Moby.
Oh, love it.
Yeah, so a Moby. It was pre-COVID, which just seems so long ago, but pre-COVID, he connected me with someone that was looking to get into the sports realm, because that was well connected with like collegiate sports along with professional sports. And Amobi at the time, he was like, well, Krystal would probably be the perfect person for this because of like her network. And at first I was not interested because I was a little nervous because I've seen deals, I've tried to like do due diligence in some of the deals that my brother sends me. And again, some of the stuff still goes over my head. And he said, well, Krystal, just be a good opportunity. Just talk to her, just listen and see what she has and see like if it would be a good opportunity for you. So I ended up meeting the managing partner, Kate. And Kate just reassured me like this would be a learning opportunity, but also a way for us to get more LPs, which are limited partners, because in this space now is that even though it's like sports entrepreneurship, another good thing is that a lot of these athletes are wanting to invest in companies, which is amazing because it's new. Like we have like Serena Williams Serena Williams Ventures, we have Steph Curry, we have Kevin Durant. My brother, of course, has been a long time investor as well. And so we're seeing all these people investing in startups. So the idea was like, okay, well, I come in, I'm connected to like a lot of the NCAA schools, and then I'm connected to a few like NFL players, and like I would be the liaison of like making sure that they understand that the W Fund is a way for them to invest in a lot of minority companies. And some of the minority companies that we have stem from, of course, like the sharing economy, along with sports. I know we have a few companies that deal with like sneakers and like fitness and health and wellness. So we have a wide range of companies that professional athletes can actually invest in. And that's pretty much how I got invested into the W Fund, but also the connection of how I was able to do that. But again, building the relationships of people in your circle that put you in names or put you in rooms that you're not even a part of. Had no idea this was happening. And shout out to Moby that was like, well, Krystal is a perfect person for this.
Yeah.
And but yeah, it just goes to show you that building relationships is truly like a currency at this point.
Yeah, it's such a great example in your own experience of how the relationships you build, and back to what you're saying is like, if you don't have access to the right rooms, it can negatively impact your funding opportunities. And I love what the W Fund's doing by bringing in women of color, people of color together to say, hey, we're going to invest in underrepresented people in the space. And so you mentioned too around kind of access in the right rooms, the relationships, Amobi bringing this opportunity to you, who we both know well. What do you wish that investors knew? Like, let's flip the tables. You're at the W Fund now, and you're kind of on the other side, and you've seen this. What do you wish other investors knew about deciding what projects to fund? Like, what do you wish you could tell folks about when they come and see, an underrepresented founder and a founder that, doesn't look like them? What do you wish that they knew about, becoming more open-minded in the space?
I think to remain unbiased. I think that's probably the number one thing that I could tell an investor, just because I've seen both sides of the coins. Like I'm working with one guy right now that has a app that he's creating. Again, it may be a really good app, and he's literally booking meetings left and right with like founders where he's like, yeah, I think I'm gonna try to get like 500K or 600K. And that's like a really nice goal for like one person with just an idea. Whereas like I know another person that's just like, I just need like 200 just to get started, or something. Like I just need that much to get started. And again, he went to an Ivy League school. And another girl, she went to Indiana University. So again, where's the disparities in that? And again, what happens is usually when they pitch, they talk about like the school they went to. They also talk about the past experiences. And then of course, most times they see someone that they're also connected with on LinkedIn. So they're like, hey, do you know this person? Like, I know this person, and it kind of exaggerates the truth, but you're connected on LinkedIn. So
right.
we're just gonna do a name drop, and then you automatically see that investor light up like, oh, okay, like that person. So I'm guessing the company based off of the fact that they just did a name drop. And so I think the number one is like coming with making sure you're unbiased about it. But I think it's hard to say, and I don't think it'll ever be done. But for me, it's like you're looking at two ideas, not the same, but they're similar. One has an MVP and they're already making money. One is an idea. Why do you go with the person that has an idea than someone that has an MVP and is already making money? Do you see their financials and it looks a little different? Like I just want to know what goes in their mind when they see similar ideas, but they end up putting more money into that idea instead of putting more into that, to the idea that actually has the MVP, the product, it's already in beta. I just want to understand the thought process. So,
Yeah.
and again, I don't even know if there's a rule like, hey, we only put money into people we see that, because for my brother, that's the only way he'll invest. It's like,
Mhm.
there has to be a beta, it has to be an MVP, it already has to be making money for him to invest. Like that's his rule of thumb.
Yeah.
Where other investors, it may look totally different. So I think I just really want to understand the thought process of what that looks like for them.
Yeah, I like that idea too of like maybe it is kind of coming up with a rule that has nothing to do with the founder, but really the progress they've made on the project.
Mhm.
Like you said, with your brother, kind of having that rule of unless there's an MVP, we aren't investing, and kind of making that rule, because at that point, it's not about who the founder is or what their background is. It's about, is the product here? Are they starting to, have a vision for it? And I think that's something we could probably have a lot of people institute. And to your point, like it also comes with less risk at the same time for you all. It's not eliminating it, but it's not like it's a negative to say, okay, we're not just going to invest in an idea. It just gets the people that have those ideas like, okay, I need to get further before I can come pitch this. So I also, in the last couple minutes, because I know we're running out of time, I want to flip the coin here. What do you wish entrepreneurs, up and coming entrepreneurs, knew when it comes to getting funding? What advice would you give to them? What do you do now when you're consulting and working with maybe student athletes or entrepreneurs in general that are going this route?
Yeah, first, have an MVP. It's really hard, in even working at the W Fund, it's hard to pitch just an idea. Yes, you may have your pitch.
And I'm going to interrupt you. MVP is most viable product.
Yes.
Just confirming. Cool. Okay.
Yes. And it's hard to pitch an idea to us. We only invest in pre-seed. So you have to have some type of funding, some type of like family and friends round for you to carry over. So we can at least see that you're trying to make money, and it, like you said, less risk. So I think that's probably the number one thing that I would think of before even, I'm speaking from the W Fund. Coming from the W Fund, that's what we look for, is like, do you have funding? Have you won any pitch competitions? What type of revenue are you bringing in? And like, what does your revenue look like for the next 6, 12, 15 months? And what's your leeway? It's like, if you have revenue coming in, how much lead time do you have? Like, how much money do you have before you run out? Like,
Yeah.
because some portfolio companies are on the brink of shutting down in like the next 3 to 6 months because their revenue is not catching up to the money that they have raised, and that's a problem. So I think the number one is like making sure you have a most valuable product, and making sure that you have money coming in that you can show that, okay, my friends and family, the friends and family round, they believe in me. The crowdsourcing or crowdfunding, they believe in me. They believe that this product will be good. So that when you do go to like investors, like the venture capital funds, then you already have the criteria that they need. Yeah. Like, okay, cool, let's continue this conversation. Like, I know you have this already. Let's see where this can develop. And even if I cannot invest in you, let me see who I can connect you to maybe they can connect you to someone else. Maybe they can connect you to more funding. Maybe they can connect you to pitch competitions. Maybe they can connect you to a mentor. So again, getting into those rooms, but also getting into those different venture capital funds, because that's where the money is. When you think about it, you'll make more money in venture capital funds than like angel investors or pre-seed investors.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. And it sounds like it's really about being prepared and having your ducks in a row, so to speak, when you go to meet people about funding your business. And you brought up relationships again. And so I want to close out. I have 2 more questions for you, and they're kind of tied in here. One would be, how did you build your network? And how do you recommend that others do the same, especially when it comes to the funding relationships? Because in my mind, I'm thinking you have relationships that can connect you and put you in rooms, right? But then when you're building relationships around potentially funding a business, what is that? Is that different? Is the relationship building different, or is it the same? Is it the same across the board with anyone that you're kind of building relationships with? So two-folded question there, but I'd love to close out on this.
Yeah, so for me, I know how when I worked for the travel company, they will always tell us, like, with selling, like, always go deep instead of wide. And so that's how I build relationships. Like, I make sure I get about 5 to 7 people, and I make sure that I continue to provide value to them and always check in, making sure, like, hey, I saw that you posted this on LinkedIn. I really resonated. We'd love to talk to you more about that. Because most of my relationships, they come from like 5 years ago. And again, pre-COVID, when I was going to a lot of networking events, I think I met you pre-COVID technically, but we never like met in person.
Right.
Crazy.
Yes.
But again, it stems from the relationships that I built 5, 6 years ago, that it's deep to the point where it's like, it doesn't matter who I build with in the next 5 years. I can always go to that person, or that person can always think of me, like when it comes to like NIL and entrepreneurship. They're like, oh, Krystal, like 2 or 3 years later, like I reconnected with someone that I haven't talked to in about 2 or 3 years, but because we have a really good relationship from years ago, they were like, okay, Krystal would be a perfect person for this, which is how I ended up speaking at the Senate hearing like in 2020 around like NIL, is because of that relationship. And so I'm not a fan of getting connected to any and everybody, because sometimes it's not worth it, and it's also sometimes superficial, and everything is like just on the surface. I'm more of a deep, like, understanding who you are, how you do it, how I can help, and how I can continue to help you from years to come. And that way, I truly believe that there are 6 degrees of separation anywhere. And I believe that my current network can touch anybody and everybody at this point.
Yeah, I love that. I love deep, not wide, because I do think we get in this habit of like, I have to meet as many people as possible and I have to keep building my network. But building your network doesn't have to be meeting as many people as possible. It could be just really honing in on those people, like you said, that you can add value to. They love you, you love them. Like, there's this relationship already. And I think just like tapping into those people that you already know, you already trust, you already know that they're fantastic. They can help you grow your network organically, versus you just say, hey, LinkedIn message this way, hey, LinkedIn message that way, because it does feel very superficial. Now, this doesn't mean that if you need something and someone can help you solve that problem, that you don't reach out or try and make that connection. But that's not building a network. That's getting a problem solved and saying, hey, Krystal, I know you do this, I need your help. That's a client relationship, right? And so I think there's different kinds of relationships, but it sounds like, in your mind, building a relationship for funding your business is the way you'd build a relationship with anyone else, which is an organic connection, or really building deep with that person and saying, okay, if I'm going to have this person fund my business, or if I'm going to fund this person's business, I want to know who they are and know what they're about. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's really true, because when you think of what I was taught, even when I was thinking about going the funding route, even with SAU, it was like, it's like a marriage. So be prepared to be married to this investor for the next 5 to 10 years. If you don't see yourself being married to this person for the next 5 to 10 years in business, do not go into business with them and do not take their money.
Yeah.
And that's even how I approach like some of the relationships that I have. It's like, do I see myself still talking to this person 5 to 10 years from now? If I don't, then it's not a good relationship to continue to build.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And I appreciate that, because I've also been in relationships that I realized I don't really like this. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think I like this person. So I don't want to be in business with this person. And I think that's a really good way to think about it. It's being in a relationship with someone that you are going to have to maintain, just like you would a romantic or a family relationship. So if you don't like that person, or you don't vibe with that person, it's not a good idea to then sign a dotted line and say, well, they're good at this or they're good at that, because it's just going to cause problems. So I appreciate that perspective. And I can say from personal experience, it is true. And it's important to if you do find out you make that mistake, get out sooner than later. Don't just let it sit. But I think, one, I appreciate your time. I know we're running a little bit over here, but my last question for you is just, what do you think all of us in the sports industry can do to support equity in these sports funds or investments? What can any of us do, or really, kind of in our own world of the sports space to help entrepreneurs with minority or underrepresented backgrounds get equity in this space? Any advice?
I think one, advocate for them, especially if like a Moby did for me, or I specifically did for one of our portfolio companies, is I understand that they have a really great product and it could help the sports world, but they were struggling with trying to find funding, but also trying to find people that want to take a chance on them. And for me, it's like, I will want someone to do that for me. So let me put her in this room and see where it goes. And I was able to make that connection because that was something I wanted to do and I felt like was needed. But on the founders' part, they were able to continue that relationship and continue to build. So I think if you just give people a chance to connect with someone in your network, then it's on them to cultivate that. So if I think in the sports world, it's so small, and as we continue to grow, I think we need to continue to stick together, and that way we can grow together, because again, there's enough room for anybody and everybody in this space. And another thing, which I know is maybe a touchy topic, but I think also investing in other sports entrepreneurships, or entrepreneurs, because again, they need funding, but they also need support too. And I know that's something that I want to do down the line, is like investing in sports entrepreneurs and investing in like even student athlete led ventures. And that may actually be a name, student athlete led ventures. Sorry, had a thought.
I love it.
Had a thought, a creative idea. But I think that's another thing. So advocating, but also investing in these type of companies, because again, imagine us and investors investing in each other's businesses, especially their startups, and us being the early investors. Imagine how much equity we could have in that company, but also confidence that we're giving to those startup entrepreneurs that are dealing in sports entrepreneurship, is like, okay, well, the community that I'm a part of and the community that I'm serving with my product supports me. So this has to work. So those would probably be the top two.
I love that. I think the advocation part is so easy to do, and yet we don't do it enough, is just making sure the people that we love and trust, and we can push them in the right rooms and get them in there. And like you said, they'll do the rest, right? If it works out, great, but that's on them. But you can push anybody into the right room, suggest anybody to be a speaker, to get in the right relationship, space. And I also appreciate the investment, because it is important that not only are we giving people the opportunity to walk into the room, we also are investing in them to get them access to stay in there and to have that opportunity to get there, right? Like, you can have the opportunity, but if you don't have the investment, you won't be able to do it. You won't be able to make it there. So I think those are huge, huge keys. And since we are wrapping up, I just want to say a huge thank you to you, Krystal, for taking time to share your experience, to be here. You highlighted so many important things that we all need to keep in mind, and truly appreciate what you're doing with your own work with the W Fund to make our industry more equitable. So thank you again for taking time to chat.
Thank you so much, Danielle, for having me. So, it's always a pleasure.
Yes, thanks again. And I know people will be probably contacting you to learn more about some of the work you're doing.
Awesome. I'm excited to connect with them. So in any way.
Great. Thanks again.
All right.